You're listening to the Decidedly podcast with Sanger Smith and Sean Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision making in your life and business.
I heard a quote the other day that was, the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done, which sounds like a stupid thing to say. But what it meant to me was that whatever you've done that was difficult is as high as you've gone so far until you do the next difficult thing. And so I was going to ask you, what is the most difficult thing you think you've done?
When we climbed that mountain in Colorado in the snow.
Oh my God, that was rough.
That was really hard.
I don't know if I told you, but my legs were wobbling. I fell a couple times.
Oh, it was scary to walk behind you and see you slipping. And I thought you were going to fall down the mountain.
I played it off on bad footing, but I was depleted.
Yeah, it was dangerous.
We should not have been on this mountain.
It was fully snow covered, and we climbed it, and it was, just us. No guide, nothing. Probably a little riskier than we needed to be.
It was, what made it risky is that we went up and it snowed while we were up there, which covered up our tracks.
Oh yeah, and we lost our bags because rookie move. Remember, we took our bags off?
We took all our bags off so that we could make the summit push without carrying our bags. And we set them by some rocks.
Mistake.
And then it snowed and covered up all the footprints that led back to the bags.
Yeah.
And we had to search for the bags
on the top of a mountain while it's in a snowstorm.
Yes. Yeah. Before we didn't want to leave them. I thought we were going to have to just leave them. So on the way down, it was really dicey, and I was so depleted. I fell a couple times.
What's the hardest thing you've done?
I think the most recent was Kilimanjaro. That's another mountain story, but it's not that it was as tough as that probably, but it was a lot higher. So it was 19,000 feet.
Yeah, way harder to breathe.
And it just got exhausting because we were moving all the time at a pretty steady climb. And it was, and I was older also. I think they're
getting harder.
Things are getting harder.
Well, the hardest thing that you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done makes sense. And yeah, it sounds silly, but there's great value that we get physically, but also like mentally and spiritually over conquering a big mountain, whether it's a literal mountain or a metaphorical mountain in our life. And whether that mountain is just running your first 5K, or whether that mountain is an ultra marathon, or whether that mountain is a real actual mountain that I'm going to go climb, like having that in my life, having that hardest thing that I'm going to do out in front of me that I'm aiming at, I think that's super important. Our guest today, his list of hard things makes our list look like a picnic. Sean Conway is a multiple world record-breaking ultra-endurance athlete. In 2011, he had nothing to do after selling his photography business and nothing to his name. So he sold his business for a £1, and that's British for dollars, by the way. He took that dream and famously broke the world record for completing 105 Ironmans in 105 days. Nobody else had ever come close to doing something like that. He was the first person to swim the length of Britain, the only one who have completed a length of Britain triathlon. He's completed the world's longest triathlon of 4,200 miles, world record for fastest self-supported cycle across Europe. He's cycled around the world, run a marathon in every UK national park, completed a triathlon around Wales, where he currently lives, and founded the global running challenge called the 496 Challenge. He's got a lot to share on resilience, determination, and not giving up. So if you've got something hard in your life where you want to become the type of person who does hard things, listen to this conversation with Sean Conway. I think you're going to be inspired. I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. Sean, when did you learn that you were an absolute maniac?
The time my mother had me tested. I'm kidding.
It's an official diagnosis.
I took that test too.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. I joke that I make a joke that I have the perfect combination of a low IQ and a short-term memory. So on that Venn diagram or whatever, it's just I think I'm just born to do long, boring things basically because I forget immediately how miserable they are.
There's got to be something meditative about these long endurance feats that you're undertaking. I mean, you're being self-deprecating, saying, I'm just not that smart. I can't remember it. But do you get into a different space when you get 50 miles into a run that's just not possible on a 5-mile jog?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I ran 65, 70 miles on Monday, Tuesday. Last week.
Yeah, just a Monday.
Yeah, and just for a laugh, I had the day off on the Tuesday, so my cousin and I started running at 7 o'clock in the evening. Just ran through the night until the end of the day, and just stopped in cafes. It was quite fun actually. But you're right. Yeah, you definitely get into a different headspace. Once you start hitting, probably not. I don't think it's a distance thing. It's probably a time thing, really. Once you're running for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, 10 hours, then it becomes a different ball game. But
to say the least.
Yeah, but this is weird. There's two mindsets that you're in. So there's the headspace you're in where everything's going well, and that's a very different headspace to, oh, things aren't going so well. Now, when things are going well, you've got no injuries, you're maybe up on time, you've got enough food and water, the weather's good, and everything's going well, then it does feel like a meditation, and it's great, and I love it, and I thrive, and I strive, and I want to be in that place, And in fact, so much so, I struggle to go out for a 10-mile run. It's just not long enough. I'm like, oh, what's the point? So it is a genuine issue with me because I land up then actually not training as much as I should, because sometimes I might only have an hour, and then part of me is like, oh, what's the point of running for an hour? Like, the runs I want to do are months long. What's the point of an hour? Where actually there is a lot of point to running every day for an hour. It's much better to run every day for an hour than to run 7 hours once a week. So, so there's the meditation of when things are going well. When things aren't going well, that is the opposite of a meditation for me. That's my brain in overload. There's 10.5 pillars of endurance that I've sort of come up with in the last 12 years of doing this stuff, which is, planning, experience, conditioning, health, nutrition, hydration, recovery, muscle management, mindset, community. That's the 10th. And then the 0.5 is luck. You've always got to have a bit of luck there in the end.
If we were talking about rugby, and I think you're a different body type on rugby makes sense. Endurance athletes are not built the same way as rugby guys.
You were talking about the notices on the lunch tables?
Yeah, so I was putting, we only had 6.5 teams. So to get more players for my team, I had to put this notice on the lunch table and then just recruiting more players. And also we only ever had 1 or 2 matches a year because there was only 1 or 2 schools in the whole of South Africa that also had 7 teams. But I'm tiny. I think I'm 140 pounds, somewhere there. So, I'm definitely not built for rugby. So no, I wasn't very good at sport at school. And then in my tired 20s, I did nothing. I don't even think I owned a pair of trainers. And if I did, I didn't use them. It was only when I turned 30 that I had a sort of a mini midlife crisis. And I thought, right, I'm going to try and do something exciting with my life because I was bored of photographing crying school children, which is my job. So
So you were talking, Sean, about the first thing you wanted to do to challenge yourself. You get into your 30s, you're thinking, hey, what the heck have I been doing for the last 10 years? I want to accomplish something big and break free from a job that I don't like. You decide to cycle, across the length of Britain?
No, so I'd done that 2 years previously, and I got the bug for cycling. So that was the only thing I had done within my old photography job. So the first thing I did was I decided to cycle around the world, which was
hold on,
sort of a little bit.
Most people would say that the chapter of their life of big challenges started with cycling across their country. But you're saying you did that, but that wasn't the beginning. It was when you went around the whole world.
Yeah.
See, that's how I know you're different, dude. I don't even cycle across my city.
I know. I just had to. But you know what? I've not cycled across my town either. So it's the one thing I have worked out. I'm a mixture of a monkey and a terrier. And the monkey in me really enjoys trying new things. And it's why I've never really stuck to one sport. I like to break things and make things and do that sort of thing. But if I'm a monkey for too long, I get very frustrated and I get agitated and anxious. So I have to feed the terrier, and the terrier, he has one job. He has to chase things, and he has to chase things that are difficult to chase. And if once I have an idea, that's the ball being thrown for the terrier. And now it's easier for me to chase it than not chase it. I don't know if you have a dog that chases a ball. I used to have a dog that 100% of the time you throw a ball, he'll chase it. If you throw the ball and hold his collar, he goes mad, absolutely mad. And I'm the same. Once if the idea pops into my brain, my wife hates it because she sees it in my eyes. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, and she's like, oh no, you've got an idea, haven't you? And then I'm like, yeah, got to do it. I'm sorry. And I can't explain it. I just have to do it. So once I'd thought of this round the world bike ride and trying to go for that record, it really was easier for me to at least try it than not try it. And that's sort of how I go into things, really, which is annoying because I wish the terrier got fed watching Netflix or something easier, but
right.
Unfortunately.
So what did you learn about yourself? Because obviously cycling around the world, you've got a lot of time alone with your thoughts. What did you learn about yourself doing that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So I learned that, well, for one, I'm really good on my own. I never get lonely ever. I don't even understand the feeling of being lonely. It's not to say that I don't enjoy other people's company. I do, but I really would prefer to sort of have a lot of my own time. And I don't think I was getting enough of that. I don't think I prioritized my sort of alone time enough in my 20s. I always sort of felt like I needed to be in the mix with people, whereas actually I probably needed to spend a bit more time out by myself, just going for long runs or walks and that sort of thing. So that I learned that about myself. I also learned that actually I'm just quite good at not stopping. I'm not the fastest person in the world. I'm not the strongest. I'm not the quickest. I'm not any of that. But actually, I'm just quite good at not stopping, and I can just keep going and plodding. I'm a diesel engine, and I'll just go and go and go. And I'm quite good at just turning off my brain, I guess, and just try to do these long things. I guess those two things in itself sort of made me realize, oh, maybe I could do more of these, really. Even though the round the world record didn't go to plan, I got run over and that ended that record. But I carried on anyway, and at least I got to finish the ride. But it sort of planted that seed in me.
You got run over.
Yeah.
Don't know by that. What happened?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was in America, in Arkansas, cycling on a road that I should never have been cycling on. Truthfully, I was allowed to legally, but it was a pretty bad road. If you knew any different, you wouldn't go on it. But I was just
nothing but bad roads in Arkansas. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know what? Yeah, every time I say I got run over in America, everyone who's not American goes, "Oh, yeah, everyone gets run over in America." But honestly, I had the best cycling experience from drivers in America from anywhere in the world. Genuinely, like
really?
Lots of yeah. I just got unlucky. But lots of places have big, hard shoulders. I found the drivers very courteous to cyclists, giving me lots of space, overtaking me, winding down the windows and saying hi. Honestly, America's my favorite place to cycle in the world, from sort of, because, everyone speaks English as well, so that makes life easier. And, you can get food at all hours, which is great for ultra cycling. Because I've also done part of Route 66. I've done Chicago to Amarillo on Route 66. So I absolutely love it. I just got unlucky. I was on a road that, the guy who ran me over, he had been doing that route for 50 years. He had never seen one cyclist. And there I am at 5 a.m, and it was raining, and it was just unlucky. It was just an accident in the literal term of it. It was just an accident, wrong place, wrong time, like for both of us. So that ended the world record attempt, but I carried on anyway to raise money for charity, and also just to cycle around the world, because no one gets that opportunity twice. So I thought, right, well, I might as well crack on, because I'm here now, So, but finishing that ride just made me realize that I had the Terrier, because I didn't quite realize that there was this Terrier in me that needed feeding. And, it satisfied, and I enjoyed the accomplishment. I enjoyed all aspects of doing these long multi-day things. I enjoyed the planning. I enjoyed the training. I loved training. I enjoyed being fitter, being healthier, eating better, spending more time outside, all the things that are a byproduct of having a long, scary goal. I loved all of it. I loved being able to write the book about it at the end. Right. All of a sudden I was like, I need to do more of this.
What's training like for something that big? Because, hey, if there's a level of training I've got to do if I want to do a 5K, maybe it's a little bit more if I want to do a 10K, a little bit more if I want to do half marathon, a marathon. It seems like at some point I can't keep increasing my training proportionate to the increase of the goal. If we're talking about
time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So for around the world, I was doing about 40 hours a week. And it's hard to do more than 40 hours a week and stay injury free, and also just not burn out, really. That seems to be the top end of almost all athletes. You look at the Tour de France riders, even they're doing about 35, 40 a week, I think. I think an easy week for them is about 15 or 20 if they're doing high power. And then, so I think that's the most I've trained. But saying that, it sounds like a lot of time. It is a lot of time, but I think 20 hours of that was on one day. Every Saturday, I would do 4 a.m. till midnight on the bike. So, half of it was on a Saturday. So technically, I was really only doing, and Saturday's the weekend. So I was doing sort of 20 hours throughout the rest of the week, I guess,
On those other days, are you doing long rides the entire day? Or are you doing like interval training, doing, gym workouts? What are those other days like?
Yeah, for the round the world was a mixture of everything. Yeah, mixture of gym, mixture of short interval stuff, and twice a week I'd do about 4 or 5 hours on the bike twice a week usually, and then the rest were just much shorter time and shorter distance, but more power. I was young back then. I was only 30, so I didn't have to do much physio, and I didn't have to do much Pilates or yoga or stretching. I just can't believe how good I had it back then compared to now, where at least 5 hours of my week is blimmin' rehab, which is annoying, but just that's what it is, eh? Whereas now I probably don't do as many long sessions, and I try and focus. I just don't want to get injured. And it seems to be more commonplace now for really the top end ultra endurance athletes seem to be dropping their long sessions now. And I'm probably the same, which is annoying. And it's also a time thing. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And
yeah.
So, that side of things means, if I tell my wife, I'm just going for a 7-hour bike ride, honey, get the divorce papers on the door when I got home. So that's not fair, really.
Yeah, that's a full work day, right?
Yeah.
So had you already decided that you were exiting the photography business at that point?
Yes. So that was the midlife crisis. So I sold the business for £1 to my business partner.
You probably could have got more.
Yeah. I probably could have got more.
At
But
least
you know
double.
what? Yeah, at least £2. I also spent £4 on the frame to frame the pound, so sort of a minus £3 deal, really. It was my sort of putting my flag in the ground, going, I will not do anything again purely for money. And by selling my business for £1, this is the beginning of that journey, right?
Was that what helped you make that decision? Because that's a big decision to sell your livelihood and go into something that, you're not going in to be an endurance athlete for the money, right?
Yeah.
There's not early on. What factored into that decision?
Just blind naivety. Yeah, there was no factoring. What I did know, the facts I had in my brain were I was unhappy, like desperately unhappy, doing the photography, to the point of insomnia, bad skin, couldn't, 2 or 3 girlfriends just were like, breaking up with me out of the blue, telling, basically saying to my face, Sean, you're a miserable bastard, just, we don't want to be around you. So I knew something had to change.
Yeah, we've all heard that.
Yeah. And I knew the core of it was my day-to-day existence, which was getting up, being this school portrait photographer. And that wasn't for me. I knew I needed to do something else in life, and I didn't really know what it was. The cycle around the world initially was going to be this sort of gap year with intent or purpose, this sort of a way for me to go traveling and get someone else to pay for it, because I didn't really have enough money to just go cycling by myself. So I had, in my head, I was like, well, if I attach a world record to it, maybe I'll get sponsorship. And then on top of that, it also gives me something to fight for in life. It gives me a reason to get out of bed, really. Because I think, and that's what the Terrier needed. Because if someone had said, oh, just go and cycle around the world slowly, I'm not sure that would have been good for me. Really, I think I'm not a very good holiday. I'm terrible on holidays. My wife's like, oh, just relax, Sean.
So are you saying you had to attach the goal to it to make it an attractive thing you wanted to move toward?
For 2 reasons.
How do you keep?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say just for 2 reasons. One, for financially to get someone to pay for it, and then 2, just for my headspace, having something to chase. Really.
How do you keep from attaching too much to the goal of that journey, and having something like an accident that causes that not to be accomplished? How do you deal with that mentally? You were talking about mental acuity being one of the pillars that you mentioned earlier. How do you deal with that?
Well, for me, the way I deal with it is I attach everything to the final result. Yeah. For me, I sort of... And especially now with the stuff I'm doing now is just getting harder and harder. Like the 105 Ironmans in a row, you have to throw everything at that. You can have no plan B. If there's a plan B, you'll take it. It's so hard, that one, and same with cycling around the world. If there was a plan B, I probably might take it, although I'm quite headstrong, so I probably wouldn't. But part of my manifesting and part of my process is to attach everything to it. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't work and it's crap and I feel awful and I don't like it. But I'm also quite good at bouncing back. And I thought, I'm like, right, okay.
It's the opposite answer from what I thought. What I thought you would say is I don't attach much to it. I'm doing it for the love of it. And, if I hit it, I hit it. But you're sounding like you're like completely the opposite.
No, and it's an unpopular opinion, unfortunately. So everyone's like, oh, it's not about the destination, man. It's all about the journey. And I'm like, whoa. No, that doesn't gel with me. No, I need. I have to have the record, and I know it's not cool to say that, but for me, the Terrier, if there's no record attached, it doesn't have to be a record, but it has to be something that I think I can't do. That's more, and often there's an elephant, and because they're so difficult, you'll end up breaking a record anyway, a lot of the time. But even if it's not a record, if it's something I feel I can't do, that satisfies the Terrier because he has something to chase. And for me, it's just getting to the finish line,
That's not the satisfaction of the stretch goal, whether it's personal or business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, For me, what I thought I couldn't do was one Ironman. Not 105 in 105 days was just insane to me. I mean, you're doing 2.4 miles swimming, 112 miles on the bike, and then a 26.2 mile marathon. And you did that for over 3 months straight without a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think anyone can look at that and say, yeah, it's probably doable. I could do that.
No.
Yeah, I could do
Yeah.
that. I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, I mean, apart from when I swam the length of Britain, that was a world's first. That one was similar on a similar level, but everything else I've done, a lot of people have gone, oh wow, that's super impressive, but I reckon I could probably do that. But yeah, swimming the length of Britain, although 2 people have done it since I did it, and the Ironmans are the 2 that people go, especially the Ironmans. That was a whole new level of difficulty, which, I'm at now I'm at a conundrum of like, oh, the Terrier's seen that now. How's he going to beat that? Which is something I'm going to have to deal with. I haven't got an answer for that yet, and I don't know what's going to happen.
How was your support structure different? Because I'm guessing there's a limit to the training, like we were talking about earlier. You can only ride or run so many hours of the day. You can do so much. But there are systems and support structures that have to be really different from running one Ironman than running a series of 105 of them. How was that different?
Oh, vastly. There are 2 entirely different things, really. You can wing an Ironman on its own. It's difficult, and it'll hurt, and it'll be hard, and you still might get injured. So I'm not saying it's an easy task doing one. However, you could throw everything at it and know that tomorrow you're doing nothing. Whereas to do 105 in a row, I had to get to a level where I could do a 13-hour or a 14-hour in zone 1. So super low heart rate, 110 heart rate, but still do enough time. So it's a balance of being so fit that when you bring it down, you're not going into the red. And then micromanaging all those 10 pillars so that you don't get injured and you don't get dehydrated and you keep on top of the calories, 8,000 calories a day. If I had 7,000 calories for 2 or 3 days on the trot, I'd lose a kg in weight maybe. And I couldn't afford to lose that. So really I had to be really on top of the eating, which I was, luckily. So yeah, when you're doing the multi-day stuff, you're always thinking about a week ahead, and you've got to almost guess how, manage today thinking about next week as well, because you might think, well, next week might be bad weather. So you've got to, and you might need a bit of extra reserves in the tank to deal with the bad weather, for example, or headwinds. You might have a big, low pressure come in, and all of a sudden you're going to have headwinds for a week. So that means you go, right, I might have to take it a bit easy this week. But then if you take it too easy, you're going to be an hour behind schedule, which means an hour less sleep, which means potentially tomorrow you're even slower. So you don't want to get into that downward spiral. Yeah. So, the difference between 1 and 105 is, or even the difference between 1 and even 7, for example, is huge, really, because you've just got to, there's so many other factors you got to think about because you're doing it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day.
How much of this were you able to anticipate? Because obviously nobody had ever done 105. How much of this were you able to anticipate versus you had to learn it as you go?
Well, that's experience is one of the 10 pillars. And I think had I not cycled around the world, had I not swum the length of Britain, I had the record for the world's longest triathlon at one point. I think all those things gave me enough experience to even put me in the ballpark of doing 105 Ironmans. Now, yeah, I had to rely on all that experience. I think if I'd gone into it not having done all those other things, that would have been a shock to the system. I think I would have got to day 3 or 4 and just, not been able to deal with it mentally, I think. So yeah, there was a lot of learning over the last 12 years to get me to that point, really. And even then it was difficult. That first week was just miserable. I was nearly timed out on the timings because you got 17 hours each day to do it. Picked up a couple of injuries that I sort of wish I hadn't. And, I made some mistakes that I shouldn't have because I have learned from them in the past. I made a saddle height issue because I had a different crank length. Silly. I didn't wear my patella straps, which I normally always wear at the beginning of a running challenge. I normally then get to take them off after about a week, but I didn't do that either. So yeah, there was a lot of little silly things, but in the lead up to doing something, it's so chaotic at the beginning, and the weeks leading up to day one, I've got no sleep. Almost when day one started, I was like, thank goodness I can just now start and do my thing, because I was so bored of, emails and, planning. And, for example, I was taking, like in the morning, I'd have a multivitamin tablet, a fish oil, electrolyte, a magnesium, and a vitamin D tablet in a little bowl. I had to make 102 of those, and just so that it was idiot proof. So in the morning, I didn't have to, what am I having? Where's my magnesium tablet? I just had 102 of these little bowls ready to go, and I could just take a bowl, have the pills, and then be done with it. So that was all in the lead up. And yeah, so that's why I made some mistakes really on the saddle height issue, for example.
It seems like that's a common theme in business too. A lot of people, whether it's starting their business or transforming their business, they're going through some change. Like before the change is underway, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of questions, well, what do I do here? What's going to happen if this happens? And how do I do this? And then when we're doing it, when we're working, like when you're running, you can't ask those questions anymore. It's just happening.
Yeah.
I mean, in anything that I've done that falls into the category of something I thought I couldn't do before I set out upon it, I had that same feeling of like, oh my gosh, at first, I don't think I can do it. 2 is maybe I can do it. 3 is I'm just ready to start, because getting ready for this is so overwhelming and boring at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's a difficult balance where sometimes, if you wanted to do 105 Ironman, you're never ready for that. You're never ready. It's like having kids. You're never ready to have kids. You just got to do it and crack on and be resilient enough to cope with the problems, be willing to change tack, pivot and turn. And if things go wrong, take a different direction quickly and think fast and be nimble and all that sort of thing. So that, again, that works in business and in sport. However, you don't want to go in too underprepared that, you make such big mistakes that it costs you a lot of time or money or relationships or connections, and you land up burning bridges. So, I think it's important to build a foundation and again, that's one of the pillars is planning, experience and planning. So it's important to build a good foundation before you get in, and then, work on your resilience and work on your decision making, and have no plan B, but be, as well, I'll contradict myself now, but be willing to move plan A around, move it to suit your situation. So for example, on the Ironmans, I would do my route on the bike in a different direction, on the run, in a different direction, depending on the wind. So if it was wind, I'd go one way, and if the wind was the other way, I'd go the other way. So that's me changing my plan and being able to just adjust and go, right, well, actually, I don't want to run down the straight river bit when there's an easterly. So I'll use that tailwind and I'll run back in the trees where I'm sheltered, and then vice versa. So, it's important to think of all those options. And then the other thing, whenever I go into these, I sit down and I spend a week on this. I think of every single possible scenario that could happen that could derail me. And I write it down and I find a solution. So, some of the big ones are getting run over on the bike by I've been run over once before. I could get run over. Right. How am I going to mitigate that? I'm going to have 5 bike lights. I'm going to have high vis, and I'm going to put reflective tape on my rear stays and on the back of my shoes and on the back of my helmet. And I'm going to just do everything. Right. So there's that. Then there's getting COVID. That was on my list. Like, right, no handshakes, which luckily the whole world's sort of on board with anyway nowadays. Wear a mask near people, which I landed up not doing in the end because I was mostly outdoors. But, I put in systems in place. And I think if you've got anything you want to do, physically, business, hobbies, whatever, I think you should write down the what ifs. What if this happens? How am I going to deal with it? Or what can I put in place to make sure that doesn't happen, or the chances of that happening are less? And that for me is super important. Super important.
Yeah. In that vein, one time, my dad asked me when we were doing a business planning meeting. He said, "Okay, imagine we're sitting here 2 years to the day from this conversation and the business has failed. It's been an utter disaster. You didn't hit these goals that you set today. What happened? What's the conversation we're having 2 years from now?"
About why. Yeah.
Yeah. And it forced me to recognize what those threats were that I wasn't thinking of. I was just thinking about what was going to go well. And I go, oh, well, it would be because of this. Okay, that's number one threat. Well, if it's not that, then it's probably this. And just like you said, identify what those problems are, and then we can figure out how to avoid them, before going into the race or before going into that season of business.
Yeah.
When you work with business owners who are setting their stretch goals, what are the mistakes that people are making in setting and achieving those stretch goals?
So I do a lot of corporate talks, and I go into big companies like Google and Microsoft and stuff, and I talk about these sort of things. And I think from my linking it into sport, I think I'm quite visual. I think people need to write things down more, I think, and as you say, write down the big scary goal. What's the thing the Terrier's chasing, and be very, really embedded in your mind. 2, why are you doing it? I think people forget why they're doing things sometimes. I think sometimes, and I do it, sometimes I forget why I've decided to do something, and I get so overwhelmed and so focused on the end that I make mistakes because I'm forgetting that actually I'm doing this because I love it. It is my job, and I'm a better person when I have these big things to chase. I'm a better father, I'm a better husband, and all these sort of things. So just remember, why you're doing it. And then also the other thing I think about a lot is, if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing? And that answer is always worse. If I wasn't doing ultra endurance sport, I'd probably still be a school portrait photographer. And even that in itself is enough fuel for the fire to put my ass in gear and get out and train harder, right? And then, think of all the things you need to do. And for me, it's these 10 pillars. What are the boxes you need to tick every single day? Or, maybe it's not every single day, but, there's some boxes you'll only have to tick once a year, some boxes once a month, some boxes once a week, and some boxes once a day. What are those? And for me, there's lots of training and stuff that I have to do every single day. Then I need to get my blood work done just to make sure I've got nothing going wrong with sort of iron and zinc and things like that. That's once a year. So I only have to do that once a year. So write down the important things which will ensure your success, and write them down. And then, as we've just talked about it, write down the things that you think will derail you, and then really focus on being in that position, because then if it does happen, it's not a shock to the system. It's not
So you mentioned these 10 pillars. One of them was the physicality, and I can relate to that. I understand that. Actually, I have no idea, but go with me. So when you talk about the mentality of it, though, what did you find was the biggest challenge in getting the mindset correctly?
My biggest challenge is, I think, it's a difficult one, because it's quite difficult for me to remember what I was like 12 years ago when I was starting. My biggest challenge now actually is being too confident, and I've got such, in my head, I'm like, man, I've done 105 Ironmans, I've swum the length of Britain, I've cycled around the world, man, I can do anything. and then I don't train hard enough and I get injured. So if anything, my issue now is my mindset's almost a bit sort of too arrogant. Let's go with arrogant, where sometimes I just need to realize you still got to put in the legwork.
You know anybody like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that with business owners a lot. Is like, when we rest on our laurels, hey, we're number one in our industry for this or that or whatever. We've won this in the past. Like that's when you stop. That's when you stop winning.
Yeah. BlackBerry phones, classic example, isn't it?
Blockbuster.
Blockbuster, BlackBerry. You see it in
Nokia.
In sports. Especially with fighters. God, they get to the top. They're the champion. The champion. And how could you not take that to your own ego? It's an individual sport. You're the only one. And then, I don't really have to try quite as hard. Boom. Devastating loss. And that's seems like a really common outcome. And when you talk about, I don't remember the person that I was 12 years ago, at least fully, you don't remember that. I see that in business too, is people think they remember what got them successful. People think they remember, and we all tell ourselves stories. Like, how well do you really remember your childhood? Yeah. You remember some elements of it, and there's some things that you've forgotten, but those things that you've forgotten may have been just as formative as some of the things that you've remembered. Yeah. And so we forget, we try to, design training programs for a business or mentor, new employees and say, oh, well, this is what I did. This is what I did. First of all, I'm not confident that you remember that is even what you did. Two is you, after all of this time and experiencing success, couldn't even successfully probably teach exactly what you did because you're so removed from it. And I see that a lot. It's like, this is, when I was starting out in this industry, I did these things, and so I'm going to have my guys do these things. Yeah. I think you're misremembering, and I think that you're probably not teaching it well because you stopped doing it about 12 years ago.
You've forgotten what it was like to not know that thing.
Yeah. Forgotten what it was like to learn from step one. You're at step 10 trying to teach step one, and you haven't even been back at step 2 in a decade.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, the one thing I do remember from the early days is I was hungry to learn. And I'm still hungry to learn now. I was emailing everyone, like Ellen MacArthur, who had the sailing record, the round the world sailing record nonstop. I was emailing her for sleep tips, and she was telling me about sleep banking and building up sleep in the lead up to something and all that sort of thing. And so I remember...
What is sleep banking?
You can build up sleep. So if you had,
this is the opposite of what I've been taught.
Yeah. No, if you had a 24-hour race starting in 2 days' time, or and you had 2 nights of 10, 12 hours, you would find that the 24 hours in 2 days would be way easier. It'd be super easy, actually. In fact, if you had 12 hours a night for sort of 2 nights in a row, maybe even 3 nights in a row, if you can, you just force yourself, or a normal 8-hour and then a 2-hour nap in the day, you could do 40 hours and not feel that sleep deprived. You'd still be tired.
Do you take anything that helps you do that? I wouldn't be able to sleep for 12 hours.
No, and I can't really either, to be honest, but you can have, it's called, they've got an acronym, NS, non-sleep restfulness or something like that.
Okay.
Not NSDR, that's it. Non-sleep deep rest, which Andrew Huberman did a podcast on it, where apparently, and there's another ultra runner who claims he gets 80% of the benefits of sleep doing this, where you just lie on the sofa with your eyes closed and do nothing. And it's called non-sleep deep rest.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, apparently it's just as good. I don't know about that. I think sleep's really good, but saying that, if I can rest as much as possible, so I did the 70-mile run on Monday or wherever it was. I had a normal 8 hours sleep the night before, and then I had 90 minutes in the day before we started at 7 o'clock in the evening. And just that 90-minute nap in the day meant I did 7 o'clock so I'd been awake from 6 a.m. all the way through till 8 p.m. the following day. So it was nearly 40 hours-ish, somewhere there, with a 90-minute nap in the afternoon. And I wasn't sleepy at all. Nothing at all. I ran 7 o'clock in the evening, right through the night, right through to the morning, right through to the afternoon, and then stayed up and, did the kids' dinner time and bedtime. And I wasn't sleepy. Yeah. So you can build up sleep, and it'll last about a day or so.
What I like about this conversation, he sort of does this throwaway line about, that 70-mile run I did, that, whatever it was. If I ran 70 miles,
I would talk so much about it. It'd be obnoxious
every day for the rest of my life.
I'd have shirts made.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know.
I'd have a bumper sticker that says, "Ask me about my 70-mile run."
Yeah.
So I have a question. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I've got a 200-mile run coming up in August, so I need to
That's why.
crack on with training, really.
It's okay to brag about it.
Yeah, sure. What's interesting, I'm finding, is that the ability to switch between these disciplines, and I guess that's growing from the triathlon, but you're doing these long distance runs, long distance bikes. We haven't talked about the swims as much. How is that different for you than the other two disciplines? Like, what did you experience that was different?
So my swims were way more miserable because one, it was cold. The water was cold. And being cold the whole time, it just sucks the energy out of you, really. It's also a lot more sort of visually sort of exciting because all you're looking at is water and sky.
Yeah, the view isn't changing.
Yeah, you're not looking at it, which I don't mind, actually. I quite like getting into that rhythm. But there's certainly nothing to stimulate your eyes and your mind because you've got nothing to look at. But then the plus side is it's very little pain in swimming. Sort of not much pain in cycling either, really. Running, there's a lot of pain. But with swimming, and also you never really push the sleep deprivation stuff in swimming too much. You have to have a pretty sorted support crew if you're going to do sleep deprivation swimming. So I've never done sleep deprivation swimming yet. So so there's elements of swimming that's easier. Yeah. There's elements of swimming that's easier, but then there's a lot of it's just way harder, mainly because of the cold. I think if I could do a warm swim, I would change my mind on that and it might be more enjoyable. But the long swims I've done have just been cold and it's just miserable. And I've been self-supported on one of them.
How do you protect against like marine life encounters, those types of things? I mean, you're not having that when you're biking, but I'm sure it's prevalent when you're swimming.
Yeah, well, in the UK, there's nothing serious. You get jellyfish and you get stung by jellyfish the whole time, and it's painful, but you're in a wetsuit, so it's only the face, which is actually why I grew the beard originally. So
it's only the face.
Yeah, it's I actually grew the beard when I swam Britain because it physically stopped the jellyfish touching my face. So once I had a bit of a beard, it stopped literally as a barrier, so the tentacles don't touch your skin. I still got stung on the nose and the cheeks a lot, but then I'm wearing a cap and goggles, and your hands. My hands were so cold, I could almost grab a jellyfish and throw it away, and I wouldn't feel it until I got out the water. So that didn't bother me too much. So I did this weird thrash to the left or right every time I took a stroke. If I saw a jellyfish ahead of me, I sort of did this thrash and got my hand and then threw the jellyfish to the side, almost like water polo. I got a goal. Because they were big, they're sort of almost a football size, a bit smaller really, with tentacles. The lion's manes have, I think, the longest tentacles in the UK, sort of 3 meters. So that was painful, but there's no dangerous. There are sharks in the UK, but there's never in the history of everything has there been a shark attack in the UK from a shark. They're very rare and they're very shy. So other than the jellyfish, I'd see seals and dolphins the whole time, which was great. They're very inquisitive and they would just come and say hi almost every day, really. But there's nothing dangerous in our waters. It's too cold. No one wants to be here. It's just miserable.
Do you ever get scared?
If I do get scared, it's usually something. It's never like the stuff I do is really sort of risk free, I think. But the times I have got scared is so in South America when I was cycling around the world, I got followed by some sort of gangster guys in the desert for hours, really coming up. Nick, I didn't know what they were up for, and I had to like go down a side track when they were out of sight, and I called the Peruvian police, and I actually randomly got a police escort for a couple of days. So I was scared there. When I swam Britain, when we came around Cape Wrath, which is the top left corner of Scotland, a big storm came out of nowhere. That one was a little scary in hindsight, but actually at the time I wasn't scared at all. And then a couple of times on my across Europe record bike ride in Russia, the roads in Russia were pretty dangerous because you're allowed to cycle on motorways in Russia, which is stupid, but you are, and you sort of have to because you won't get the record otherwise. So there's a couple of scary moments from sort of poor driving, I guess. But mostly, no. Mostly, I don't get scared because I've written that list of everything, and I'm trusting that I've done everything I can to make sure I'm going to come out of this safely. And I still think most of the stuff I do is your sort of risk of dying is quite low. I think ultra cycling is probably your biggest danger, really, from a traffic accident. Two of my friends have been killed, unfortunately, by being run over. So I think, no one, ultra running's pretty safe, swimming's pretty safe, I think, in the UK anyway. So yeah, there's not a lot that I do that has a big fear element to it, I guess.
But I would guess that if you've sort of done that pre-mortem, identified what things could go wrong ahead of time, dealing with the chaos of that uncertainty becomes more manageable. If you've done that work, it would be the unknowns pop up that might be more disruptive. When you think about all of this, what would you say is your top decision-making tip for business owners?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's hard, I think you need to be able to make decisions quickly, but not hastily, if that makes sense. I think every time something's gone wrong with me, I've reverse engineered it, and it's usually down to me probably of making a poor decision too hastily. Whereas, I think, they say less haste, more speed, right? And I think for me, that would be the thing that if anything's gone wrong, I've probably made a decision on a whim or just not really thought about it. Like when I got run over in America, really, it would have taken me 5 seconds to go on Google Street View to look at that road, and I would have known that is not a good road for cycling. It was busy. It had no hard shoulder. It was potholed. I could have done a back road and been on a quieter road. So not to say I could have also been run over on that back road, of course, but there's a tornado just come through, and it was busy, and I'd done a short day the day before as well, my shortest day, and I just wanted to get on the bike and make up for that short day, and I think that was a bad decision. So, and I landed up going on this road that maybe if I'd just done a little bit of research, I'd have looked at it and gone, actually, I'm gonna do a different road. And the same when I got it. So in my first attempt for the Ironmans, I attempted it in 2022 and got injured. I came off the bike, and when I reverse engineer that, I think, right, well, actually, there was decisions I made. Basically, I fell. I was trying to get a packet of crisps out my jersey back pocket, and I put my hand on the elbow pad of the aero bars, and then I hit a pothole, and then I just sort of swerved. And I shouldn't have been in such a rush. I should have just taken my time, held the handlebar properly, like I know to, on the hood, taken it out slowly, and just being a bit more thoughtful on that. So I think when everything's gone wrong, I've really not thought that little thing through, and that's caused something else. So I think, not being able to be quick on your feet, but don't be too hasty, if that makes sense. I think that for me would be the thing I've learned,
You're giving me flashbacks to an Ironman in Hawaii where I did that exact same thing, put my hand on the aero bars, hit a pothole, swerved, and ran headfirst into a field of lava rocks, flipped over on my back.
Oh, no.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, brutal. Bruises on my back probably still from that. But thanks for being here, sharing your stories and wisdom. Where can people connect with you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, if you just search Sean Conway on all social medias and SeanConway.com, I guess. And on Amazon Prime, I've got 3 documentaries. I've got 6 books on Amazon as well. So yeah, if you just search my name, I'm the only Sean Conway with a big ginger beard in the world, I believe. So I'm easy to find.
Sean Conway, thanks, man.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sean. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks very much.
I probably have a dozen takeaways from our discussion with Sean, but my takeaway is that when he approaches decision making, he's so thoughtful in that he's got these 10 pillars. He writes down a pre-mortem, if you will, about what could go wrong, and so that he's very prepared. So that allows him to make quick decisions because he's thought through how these things are impacting the biggest risks he faces with an eye towards the big goal.
My biggest takeaway is the preparedness and how he identifies every single threat that could derail his plan. We can do that in our business and say, what's going to cause me to potentially fail on this goal? If we can identify it beforehand, we can identify solutions beforehand, hopefully avoid them entirely. And then if they do come up, at the very least, we're not surprised.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Sean's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.